Monday Night Football yesterday featured two running backs who might seem different in many ways, but in fact are very closely aligned during their respective careers. Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift. Jones is 30, going on 31. Swift is 26, going on 27. That's pretty much the biggest differences. The uh, Both guys have played for combined all four NFC North teams, which is interesting. Both guys have been very fantasy relevant for many years. Both guys are very effective in the passing game, receiving game, and both are highly efficient runners. Jones even more so. When Jones played for Green Bay, he averaged 5 yards a carry, just north of 5 yards a carry, before moving to Minnesota last year. And Swift was with Detroit and averaged about, give or take, 4.6, 4.7 yards a carry. And then spent a year with the Eagles before Saquon Barkley replaced him, and he moved on to Chicago. I also believe that both those running backs were overvalued this summer. Not dramatically. Positionally, I had them about where their ADPs were, but I was fading them overall, choosing quarterbacks and wide receivers that were just below them in the ADP and pushing them ahead of those two running backs. So with Jones, I think I had Jones about 15 spots worse than his overall ADP. Swift, I had about 12 spots, 8 spots, something in there below their ADP. The reason was they were still starters. They were still very capable of putting up top 30 numbers at their respective positions. But both, I believed, were pretty risky when it comes down to full season production. That with Aaron Jones, I believed Jordan Mason, it was only a matter of time before Mason would be not just the 1B, but potentially side by side with Jones. Mason, of course, last year broke through with San Francisco, could easily be a top 30 running back, even if Jones has a fine year. For Swift, it was a little more complicated because there was no obvious backup. For a while in July, I thought Rashawn Johnson was going to have a good preseason and carve out a role, and that doesn't seem like that'll take place. But the point is, between Kyle Monange, the rookie, there's the potential there for Swift to be pushed aside somewhat. And that's the thing with these two. The pushed aside is whether or not those two on teams that should be competitive this year, that should be playoff contenders, even if it's close. Both teams are vying, and I think they have the talent to be playoff contenders. So therefore, their running backs need to play at a certain level. They can't just run out the clock on the season. At some point, if Jones and or Swift are not what they should be, then each team might decide they need something better to become playoff contenders and or deep playoff contenders, deep run playoff contenders. Swift is the more difficult one because he's coming off a season. He's 3.8 yards a carry. It was a career high in terms of touches. It was like 290 something. And in my opinion, that's not what you need to do with Swift, which is why for much of his career, he was kept in check. For a team that drafted him, Detroit, largely kept him in check, kept him around 200 touches or so. Even though he missed some time, the reality was Swift never really broke through until he left Detroit, went to the Eagles. Then the Eagles worked him really hard, got him, close to 300 touches, including the playoffs, and then let him loose. And then he goes to Chicago and he has his worst statistical season. Not just worse, but much worse when you look beyond the obvious numbers. I mean, his broken tackle rate was by far a career low. And yards after contact was middling at best. Yards before contact, easily career low. He could still catch the ball, but his efficiency dropped significantly. And the question is, even at age 26, is he built to be able to rebound and become the efficient bell cow that the Eagles kind of had before they ran him somewhat into the ground, not entirely, but enough where last year he took a step back. You could blame the offensive line as well, but you can only blame the offensive line so much, especially when teammates are doing better. That brings us to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was kept in check by his team that drafted him, Green Bay. I've marveled at that for years, that Green Bay seemed to be doing something right, getting Aaron Jones 250 to 280 touches a season, more or less, which for a bell cow is pretty respectable, given the fact that a lot of bell cows were easily exceeding 300 to 350, but if they got to the playoffs, and some even approaching 400. Jones always was kept in check. And as a result, for a good chunk of his career, he didn't miss much time. He would miss 2 games here, 1 game there. But then in his final season in Green Bay, he kind of hit that wall at age 29 season, missed 6 games or whatever, and dropped to his worst yards per carry of his career. And he walked away and joined Minnesota last year, averaging a little over, like I said, 5 yards a carry. For Minnesota, he had also his worst, his new worst yards per carry of his career, his worst broken tackle rate of his career, his worst yards after first contact since his 2018 campaign. So going into this season, with the addition of Jordan Mason, the question became, is a 30-year-old Aaron Jones someone you can really trust to be the guy for an entire 17-game season? Or if you do the fantasy playoffs the way most people do, 16 games before the basically irrelevant week 18. This is why I softly faded both those guys. I didn't want to draft them, but I was thinking about drafting them if I knew I could get the backup. With Jones, it was easier. With Mason, with Swift, it was a little harder, but I would have gone for Monange if Swift had fallen into my lap. Last night, it's pretty interesting to see how it all broke out. Aaron Jones got the fantasy love. Aaron Jones is the big story, because he picks up, roughly 15, 16 fantasy points. He runs only 2.9 yards a carry. You could blame that on the Bears defense, but Jordan Mason rushed for, over 5 yards a carry, looked terrific. So going into week 2, you can look at the fantasy numbers and say, oh yeah, Jones is safe. Jones is good. He did his job. But really, from where I'm sitting, Jones lost value and Mason gained value. Whether that continues, who knows? It reminds me a little bit, tiny bit, of Rachaad White and Bucky Irving last year for Tampa Bay. I was very high on Irving. I was very down on White for all the reasons that I expressed last summer. And I was never going to draft White last summer, and I urged people to invest heavily in Irving. Mason is kind of the Irving minus the massive, receiving numbers. That Mason seems to be just passing the eye test. Mason seems to be someone who will take over, even if it's not truly take over, but in terms of getting the 1A role in that offense at some point. I am very concerned about an approaching 31-year-old Jones coming off the biggest workload, I think, or just shy, 1 or 2 touches shy of the biggest workload of his career, coming in his age 31 season and actually being productive. In the same way that I'm very concerned about Swift, who also ran poorly. He did get some catches. He was able to manufacture roughly 10 fantasy points. That will be good enough for some people, especially if you won the week. That's really what it comes down to. But we've seen this play out before. Last year, Swift struggled repeatedly, week after week, with his rushing. The receptions were the key for him, but if you take out the receptions, he really was just TD dependent. And I know that's not fair because receptions play a role, but all it takes is for the Bears to start slow and realize, you know what, Swift is a net negative in this offense, that we need more. So whether that's Monange, whether that's Rashawn Johnson, whether that's someone they sign, if they sign a Gus Edwards or something like that, or if they trade for a running back. I'm selling Swift if I had him. I'd be selling Jones if I had him. Jones is an easier sell at this point because he got the fantasy production. I would urge managers not to hold on to Jones unless you have Mason, and then I understand the hedge. But if you have Swift, I really don't understand it because it seems like the clock is ticking for that guy. That at some point the Bears are going to say, this is not working for us. And at that point, Swift might go from serviceable to unstartable. This is BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. We'll see you tomorrow.